coordinators are Professor Shinjini Bhatnagar and Professor Renu Varghese. I introduce Professor Shinjini Bhatnagar is a physician scientist who's worked in the Department of Pediatrics at AIMS for 25 years. She has worked on the introduction of ORS and zinc in the treatment of childhood diarrhea and a diagnostic test for celiac disease. Currently, she is coordinating two important programs, which is Garbini and the evaluation of zinc as an adjunct to antimicrobial therapy. I will now introduce Professor Renu Varghese. Professor Varghese is a professor of pathology and director principal at Pondicherry Institute of Medical Sciences, Puducherry, India. She had a medical education at Stanley Medical College, Chennai, and she's an accomplished medical educationist. She brings in decades of experience of delivery of medical healthcare and education and encourages multidisciplinary research. So the speakers who are part of the panel are Professor Alison, Professor Anurag Agrawal, Professor Phaneendra Yalavarthy, and Dr. Himanshu Sinha. We have already had introductions for Alison, Phaneendra, and Himanshu, so I will just introduce Professor Anurag Agrawal. Professor Anurag Agrawal is Dean Biosciences and Health Research at the Trivedi School of Biosciences, Ashoka University, India, and former director of the Institute of Genomics and Integrative Biology, IGIB. His primary research interest is in respiratory biology, and broader interests are in new vision of health and healthcare seen through the lenses of emerging technologies. Thank you. Okay, not how do you actually take all this AI into healthcare? What is required? What is the background work you need to do? And therefore, we decided to set up to be able to take this forward. And before we go jump into it, I'm going to take a minute to introduce why we are here. And so we began with support from Department of Biotechnology, and I want Anamika to raise her hand. We haven't been able to welcome our DBT team, which is Anamika and Neha, who is also been there for the last couple of years, who actually supported Garbini, which was brainchild of Professor M.K. Khan and then taken forward by DBT, by these wonderful women. And because we had a Garbini platform, which is truly interdisciplinary, so we have Ashok Khurana, who is, as people say, one of the best sonographers in India. And if you need appointment in the first trimester, you get it in the third trimester. So that's what was I'm quoting someone else who said this. And has been actually responsible with our team, which consists of Ram, Kondi, Nitya leading it, uh, and Ayushi and Varun and Divyanshu. And so I just want to tell you that we are a bunch of, I'm a pediatrician, Nitya is a pediatrician, Ram is a pediatrician. And then we have data scientists who are physicians, and then we have pure data scientists. We have from other side, proteomics, genomics, and then came along Alison and Alice with their teams. So this was how we moved forward in our cohort with Galvani and then calipers and AI. And AI came in because we had some interested in data science who wanted to work. So this is how we set up our team. And I would actually pass the mic around. Like to speak now? Yeah. Anurag, I'd like to ask you how you would think about setting up interdisciplinary teams for work like this.
Great. So, Shinjini, I think you gave the most perfect start to this particular topic by talking about Galvani, which allows me to make the main point in my head when I think about interdiscipline. Sometimes I do this talk called multi, inter, and trans, brothers from different mothers. And the point really when you speak about interdiscipline is what is different from multidiscipline. If you had simply taken a personologist, a physician, a data scientist, a public health person, a genomics person, and created a it would have been a multidisciplinary. But what you said is you took physicians interested in data science, not one of the best ultrasonologist who is interested not in the ultrasonology, but in the entire science and application in general as a team. You brought in people like yourself who span everything from management to pediatrics to outcomes. And that's what created interdisciplinary. Problem that made it inter and eventually to become trans. When you create a kind of output that will grow into discipline by itself. And that, to my mind, is what it is really about. It's not about hiring a bunch of people in different departments and putting them together. It's about having a larger goal and purpose and vision. And that is usually the challenge. Most things in this world get put together without a larger purpose. They're done because you need to be called interdisciplinary. So you hire one person from this branch, one person from this branch. They all do what they do, and you never really get that intersection that you want. And that is, in my mind, in India in particular, been the biggest challenge. The medical schools are one type of place. You would be hard pressed to find an engineer in a medical school. The engineering schools are one type of place, despite the efforts being made by many. You'll be hard pressed to find too many doctors over there. Universities are supposed to be multi and inter. Universities are dissociated from professional education. Mission projects are supposed to be necessarily be trans and interdisciplinary, but those tend to be organized in a formal structure. So it is individual efforts in this country that lead by circumstance of the right set of people coming together to create interdisciplinarity. And that is something we can't afford to leave program. And that's where many of the programs Anamika has been doing. Think about this concept from the very beginning. And even if our educational system does not promote it directly, we can build a layer on top of conventional education that promotes this. So that's my initial comments on what I see as the main problems and what I see by the meaning of the word interdisciplinary.
So anything that you'd like to, a quick line or two about the disciplinary team you have made and thinking of?
Sure. So one of the interdisciplinary people that I can think of is sitting right here. So my experience with this is you get the right set of people, you give them freedom to explore things they would not normally in the education system be allowed to explore. And at an education level, you will create interdisciplinarity. And to me, on the topic of today of AI and transforming healthcare, it is really about starting with people who we feel engineers and giving them foundations in biology and public health and the problem at large, and taking physicians, giving them exposure to data science. I think the ecosystem and the willingness exists. And to me, the center that we had led for translation research in asthma and lung disease was one such effort where we could use the CSIR's overall framework with lots of money on it. We should make sure such opportunities are available to everyone.
Sure, and I agree with everything that said. You expressed it beautifully. I think what interdisciplinary research really does is it's challenging the traditional academic norms, which is to have these traditional medicine, engineering, physics, etc. And it's about how you will link up the two, as we've said. The challenges in academia is that that's sometimes seen as not as important, that's secondary, rather than you being pure to a discipline. And that then translates, if you want to stay in academia, to challenges in a career as well. Of which department are you based in? How will you get promotion? What is the career path? And that sort of conversation is maybe something we will be picking up. In terms of my own experience, what was really important in Oxford was when, as an engineering department is in the city centre, the medical school is based at hospitals, is the biomedical engineers, as we would describe it, came up the hill and had a look and were physically based on the medical campus. This at the time, it was 2008, was thought as risky, ambitious, interesting if it works, because everything was very much these traditional barriers. But we were really strongly encouraged to do that by the medical sciences division, and immediately just basically were adopted by them. And the fact you had a physical presence in one of the buildings where everybody else was working on medical science, it was what I wanted to do, but importantly, it meant it became normal for the engineers working in your team to just be present on a hospital site, not feel that they were taking time away from doctors, but they were part of the community. And that, I think, for us, that co-location has been really important. It's not the only thing that matters, but I personally think it made a big difference. The other difference, I think this is maybe partly what's been created in Oxford, where we have a very large medical school, is, and also from engineering, is that as we like to publish papers, but we're more proud of the impact we have. And if you're going to have impact, you've got to be surrounded by people who have the same vision, who want to achieve the same thing. So in biomedical engineering, you're not going to succeed if you're an engineer and have an engineering team. You need to be coupled with the medical colleagues and the clinical colleagues to make things happen. Similarly, they need to be coupled to you to have the impact of using technology. So then it's, if you connect up, that's when things really happen. So I think that's sort of reinforcing on what you're saying, but I think that's what made a big difference to what we've been able to do.
Absolutely, and I think we're going to have one such example in Bangalore soon. Phaneendra, would you want to talk about it? Yeah.
Thank you. I think both the previous speakers have nicely summarized. Just to say, interdisciplinary work is hard. So this much I can tell. Doing engineering, what I used to do, is a lot more easier. When you have to do interdisciplinary work, you have to bring in people on the same page. And obviously, all of them have their own thoughts and ideas, what they think is important. But ultimately, it has to tie up to a goal. But having said that, so let's just say that, for example, traditionally, institutes like IISc, IITs have always been focusing on STEM education, which is science, technology, engineering, and management to a certain extent. So never it has ventured into the medicine. But now things are changing. So now if you really see in the last 2 years, all of them want to start medical schools because all of them think that these are harder problems to solve and it requires consolidated effort from everybody to come in together and solve the problems. Of course, workshops like this will also highlight those efforts. which are in the interdisciplinary nature. And IISc itself is going to start a medical school, which is 832 beds hospital. And it's a massive project crossing about 1,000 crores, which is going to occupy quite a bit of space in the IISc system itself. But having said that, I just would like to emphasize that uh, if you have to build such labs, such interdisciplinary teams, it's very, very important that you identify the people who have the same bandwidth and same wavelength as you. I mean, they can come from medicine background, they can come from various other backgrounds, but it's very important to do that and also come up with some innovative solutions to make this work. Because collection of the data, analyzing the data is probably the easiest part. Collection of the data is what becomes very, very critical and important. So one of such example I can give is we talked about how federated learning helps, how collection of the data is always a problem because of the privacy and other things. So recently what our lab did was, this is just giving my own example, is that we said to the hospital that just give us the space. So we won't take the data out of the hospital, just give us the space, we'll put our machines there. Our machines will be hooked up into the intra network of the hospital, such that we can do the model training and model validation then and there in the hospital itself. So, and like this, we have set up two labs. One is with the Aster CMI hospital. Another one which is going to come up is in the Narayana Hrudayalaya, which is just at the far end of the Bangalore. But of course, this requires a lot of resources from our side to put up, because now we have to put up people there to work, to put the machines there, to do the annotations, to do the model training. So we require people who is willing to go to the hospitals and work. That is, engineers who are willing to be seated in those places and work. So these are some few examples I can give in terms of how to make things work. Thank you.
Himanshu, and Himanshu is also an adopted Galvani member. And I have Abhinav and Yashdeep as other adopted Galvani members. So before you, I just want to say that one of the ways of building these teams is don't just get restricted by what you have around you or what your core faculty is. Just reach out, just go out. We reached out to Yashdeep and his team. We reached out to Abhinav and his team just because we needed to move forward. So that's really, really crucial.
Yeah. Thanks, Shinjini, for adopting me to the project. No, so that was an eye opener for me. I was a very, very comfortable population genetist, sitting and analyzing yeast genomes and playing with them, which you can do, and loving beer and bread. But Garbani came along. But I want to emphasize, like I completely agree with all the previous three comments. What I also want to comment on is that you need disruption, and that's sort of is something very important, because we are, if you look at scientists, they usually do not like to move out of their comfort zones. And
nor do physicians.
No, scientists, like all scientists includes everybody, right? So nobody wants to move out because life is moving smoothly. Why do you want to go and scratch your brain again and start learning some things that you have never thought of learning? But I think that's where disruption is required. And that's, I think, seeds the idea of interdisciplinary. Because if you look at, I just want to give how IIT Madras became sort of what it is doing now. If you look at the online BSc Data Science and AI program, now that's a hugely disruptive program, because getting admission to IIT is one of the toughest exam. JEE is the toughest exam in the world. Now you have these almost 15,000 students who have a scope of getting an IIT Madras degree, a bachelor's degree, which is disruptive. Now, like that, there are several other programs. So when I was hired at IIT Madras, it was a interdisciplinary advertisement. It wasn't for biotechnology, it wasn't for computer science, it wasn't for chemical engineering. It was for an interdisciplinary faculty who would run a center which would be doing biological data analysis using technologies that have been developed in engineering. And the idea was that engineering algorithms and technologies are very good at doing certain things, and biology can provide low-hanging fruits for them, and they can use those same, copy paste and use the same. So for example, we have manufacturing analytics as a very strong group in IIT Madras. They look at how industries, like they make algorithms to see how industries are about, like if there is an industry, what are the parameters you should measure? before the industry, some failure happens, can you detect that failure and can you sort of prevent that? And that's exactly what one would want to do in disease modeling as well, right? If you can detect in advance, you should be able to prevent it in advance. So that's something that is very important. And one of the things that I would like to emphasize that if you introduce engineers, I'm talking of young engineers who are doing the BTechs or the MTechs, to the idea that whatever social network you're analyzing, whatever other networks or data that you're analyzing is not going to, it's an esoteric problem that would solve some fundamental problem that exists. But if you now use healthcare data and apply the same effort, you probably would be solving something which is going to be socially relevant, and that excites them a lot. So for example, in my lab, I have an engineering physics student, 2 mechanical engineering student, and 3 chemical engineering student, and 2 computer science, apart from the biology student. So this, and why they're all interested, thanks to Garbani. You tell them you're going to do risk stratification modeling for preterm birth. Really, how's the data looking? I just tell them, for you, the data is like a matrix. You just have to read about certain things. You don't have to go through the whole book of OBGYN to understand what is to be done. So, and that excites them because what it means for them is that they can first help a socially relevant problem. And that is what makes, and some of the students have actually gone on to do their doctorate in public health because that was their initiation into this kind of research. So that's my initial comment.
Thank you, Himanshu. So, Renu, I would like you to give some comments on what you think.
So here, like Dr. Himanshu said, to really start in interdisciplinary, you should expose your undergraduate students to all forms of education, research. So we in our institute, what we do is, we are basically a medical college, but our students are permitted to go into rural health. We initiate them into research. This is not a part of the standard medical curriculum. We introduce them to humanities. So by the time they come out, they have a holistic approach to their career. They know what they want. Today we have one student selected for the IIS internship program. She'll be joining in August. We have so many more doing STS projects, doing research audits abroad. Now, once we expose them to this, it is our next generation also will be into the interdisciplinary. We cannot function as silos anymore. Right? Into the community, that's where we need to go. So like what Professor Hurst said, she has gone into the community where she is reaching out to the pregnant women who will not have access to care. So what can we do for everybody? So that's how the interdisciplinary has to go forward. And I'm amazed at this crowd here. We have to decide what can be really done and what is acceptable, what our challenges are, where we should be careful. So I think that will be what you need to discuss. How far can you take your artificial intelligence? How far can you rely on it? Because I do have questions, and I think
So what we're bringing up very important is that while setting up the teams and keeping to AI, and all of you worked on it, what are the challenges that you have faced?
So maybe before I'll come to that, I'll come to a point Himanshu made and take a little bit further on that. He talked about the comfort zone. My own experience is it's more about inertia. It's not so much that people want to be there and refuse to move. It is that it is nature's law Whatever is stays in the state it is. So if you want to move something with inertia, there are two things, right? You apply force. A force can be a push or a pull. Sometimes if you give them very, very challenging problems that are very attractive, expose them to problems of people in the rural systems, it can be a pull, a higher cause calls them. Sometimes can be a push. You just push them out of their zone and you make them get out. That's what Shinjini does. Shinjini uses both push and pull very, very appropriate manner. Can't say anything about my host.
I'm being maligned. Huh?
And the last part, there is friction. Neither push nor pull will work if there is a huge amount of friction. The system does not permit it to start moving. What Shinjini really does and what she has done for Garbhini, she has spent years polishing a very rough system into a very smooth one. From where it started. From where it started, it's a very smooth one so that people with small forces acting upon them can please start rolling and gather some momentum. Now coming back to the original point of AI in health. My experience
And the
is
challenges for
and the challenges.
interdisciplinary.
Yeah. So my experience is the following. There are plenty of young doctors out there who would love to get an exposure of the data sciences and computing. Everybody learns computers now in school. Many of them are proficient programmers. Not everybody is like me who started loving programming, then my father kicked me to multidisciplinarity by forcing me to go to medical school. But most people want to do things. It's the opportunity that is lacking. And that is a lovely position to be in because such opportunities of getting exposure to programming and training, I have found if we look for them, they're available. There are enough number of motivated people in companies and data science places who would love to take young doctors with course. Other direction is a bit harder. A young MBBS doctor does not have tremendous job opportunities. They are looking to expand their. They'll anyway have to specialize further and study more before somebody wants them. A BTech computer science, on the other hand, has plenty of job opportunities, are very good. Getting them to stay on and want to take biological problems requires significantly greater push and pull. And I think this problem will not get solved until what people are trying to do to create those push and pulls within the engineering training ecosystem. And that's why I think that rather than AIMS trying to build engineering, IIT building a medical school is a more viable alternative. Once you put the two together, there are two ways again you can expect it to grow. One is you can think there are different type of people talking and having coffee. You will become interdisciplinarity. It might lead to interdisciplinary families at least. I'm not sure how far it will go. Then is actual formal training, where you incorporate that into the syllabi, allow people to get credits, and follow the foreign university system of majors and minors, in which a person can do social science. And a very important point that you made, social sciences should never be forgotten when we speak of interdisciplinary, where a person can simultaneously be a political scientist with a CS minor and a biology minor all together. And this will be the true melting pot within one education. So rather than trying to build interdisciplinarity by taking people from multiple disciplines together, you're trying to create a little bit of interest within the same person. To me, that's where AI and health need to move. Social science integration, I think, is not yet done, is going to become progressively more important as we discuss later on, perhaps, what AI can and cannot do and what the risks are. So I think social science is very needed. But more than anything, we need the forces and the type of people in the ecosystem who reduce the friction.
We'll come to the solutions, more practical ones in the next round. But Alison, we'd like to know your challenges.
Well, I think we've been touching on the challenges. Is how do you do the education of people? It is the one model, the other multiple models of learning, and I often get asked this as well. And I think in my own case, why am I an interdisciplinary scientist as well? Well, I studied engineering science, not a discipline, so I'd already got an element of diversity. And then I think, being selfish, I love learning new things. So although we've said some people like to stay within a discipline, I know I'm not. I want to learn everything. So because of that, my team comes with me. I take them with me. We look at different questions. We're looking at the gaps. We're looking at the opportunity to collaborate with people. And then you have to put in the effort to learn the language of the other disciplines. The point about saying social sciences, that I think it is, that's what I'm starting to do. I'm very interested in AI ethics and in the healthcare area. In Oxford, I'm on the steering committee of our new AI and ethics institutes. And why I wanted to do that was partly to learn, but I think it's really important to the future. If the engineering technologies are going to get out and be used, we've got to engage, we've got to understand some of these issues. So I think some of interdisciplinary science is driven by the people who work in the field, and people like myself, who have actually, I've been very comfortable in crossing boundaries, and I want to cross as many boundaries as possible throughout my career, and gradually work with more and more people, and through that recruiting different people, which has been touched on before. I've had students on MD, PhD programs. There's an NIH program with Oxford and Cambridge. I've had students on that who are studying to be doctors. They come into the lab. And even in terms of engineering, as mentioned, having different types of engineer, the lab works best when we've got that diversity, because then people learn from each other, and then they're comfortable in just asking questions. And I think it's creating those environments is what makes interdisciplinary science. But the challenge is, as you pointed out right at the beginning, was it takes time and effort, and you have to yourself see the value of doing that to reap the benefits of that. So then you start coupling research. You can only answer certain research questions if you've got a talented interdisciplinary team. And then if you get the nice circle of education of people, as well as delivering on the science. But that takes many years to reach the point where you've got a group that can function like that.
What's your big challenge?
I think both Anurag and Alison has nicely pointed out. So the most important thing in all this process is that time. Time is the essence, right? So because there are teams which are going to work on similar problems to yours, because the world is actually moving faster. And if you are starting off now, where do you catch up? Where do you go forward? Because already there are teams which are already ahead in the time, and you are just starting now. You have to build the momentum to do this. This is the first problem we face. So that is whether you are going to build that top cutting edge solution, or are you the one who is chasing that cutting edge solution in terms of doing that? That clarity should be there from the start, right? In that way, coming up with a problem statement which comes from the grassroots level is very, very important, because that should not be a solved problem. If it is already solved, then you are kind of there in the chasing problem rather than doing it as innovative solution. That is the number one thing which I can mention. And the other thing which I say most of the time is the rigid boundaries we have. For example, if you look at even IISc system or IIT systems, they don't really allow other departments or other discipline people to naturally flow into a PhD program of computer science. For example, if you look at computer science PhD programs, I'm just giving computer science as an example, not that I hate computer science or anything like that, but they allow only the electrical engineering and computer science disciplines to come into their PhD program. We have such a rigid structure. Whereas, for example, if you look at Stanford CS program, they allow even people with biology backgrounds to come into the CS. So whereas in India, we have these rigid boundaries, we think that if you have only that BTech in computer science, you are good enough to do this kind of problems. So this rigid boundaries is what is one of the biggest challenges we have. Luckily now the boundaries are becoming more porous. There are people who are realizing this. This is number one. Number two is the career options. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody has to have a roof over their head and have 3 meals to feed themselves after all this training, because one of your relatives is going to ask how much you are earning. So you have to answer that question, whether you want it or not. Right. So that's going to be another challenge. We don't have that many career options for somebody who has interdisciplinary training, because the reason is we don't have interdisciplinary institutes which are getting built. THSTI, one nice example there. but how many of them are there in the country, right? Already the faculty positions are in very high demand, and how many of them allow the interdisciplinary training? As Anurag pointed out, as Alison pointed out, if you are working in the interdisciplinary project, your productivity is going to be probably slightly lesser than somebody who works in the traditional engineering and traditional sciences. So they are going to compare your publications with them. Maybe you have more impact, but the problem is in the number game you lose. So how do you balance this? This is another challenge which we have, sensitizing and other things. And the third thing is the funding. No matter what today, let's imagine that I'm a physics person, and then I try to apply for a clinical project. Nobody will give me funding because they think that I am not relevant for that project or I don't have the training which is required. So that means that I have to invest some kind of time and effort to prove that I'm good enough. I have to generate the initial data to prove that my grant application goes through. So that's the other challenge we have. How do we enable the funding? Even though the DBT to a certain extent, Wellcome Trust to a certain extent, kind of try to push this interdisciplinarity and then bring funding, but still it is a challenge. Funding is going to be another challenge. That means that you need to rely on some other PI who has the experience to piggyback or like push and pull we were talking about. Even from the funding point of view, we have to think about this.
So I think I just want to add on to certain things that are challenges and the solutions that are being proposed. For example, if you look at the profile of BSc in data science, online BSc in data science students, you would be surprised to see how many doctors who are MBBS are enrolled in that. And that shows very clearly that there is a drive to become more cross-disciplinary because they are already MBBS. They can very well take a standard path and become MD doctors, but they also want to make sure, because the online program allows you to invest time without a sort of a restrictive timeline. If you go for a actual degree, you would have to go to university or college and attend classes. Here you are taking videos, right? So number of MBBS final year students is huge. So that's one thing that is sort of a challenge that should be resolved. And I completely agree on the funding part, what was being mentioned. See, the reason many of the computer science faculty or an electrical engineering faculty may not get funding is exactly because they might have very good algorithms that can solve very important biological problems, is that they never have a PubMed publication. They're all publications in AIE or something like that, and they would never feature in that. And somebody in the grant agency would look at no publication in this field, probably not. And I think things are changing. So we do need a lot of the challenges to educate people, both at the granting side, both at the student side, and both at the university side. And one last point I would like to add for IIT Madras is that one of the things that we did was to free up a lot of electives for students. So now any student from any stream can take electives in data science and graduate with an MTech in data science. It could be BTech in biotechnology, BTech in computer science, BTech in civil, but also be MTech in data science. And those kind of transformative things are required. And there are few challenges there as well, because ultimately it comes to job. Because if you look at job advertisements, computer science faculty will want a faculty should be BTech in computer science to be eligible to apply for a assistant professor position in computer science. That's still the case. And that is something that maybe national education policy might change, but this is still a challenge. And I think there are several challenges still to do interdisciplinary research, which need to be resolved, but maybe there is some enlightenment in that direction that things might change.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment on funding and what's happened in the UK. You can maybe comment on whether it's the same in India. Is within that we have an Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council, and a good number of years ago they created a special theme called healthcare technologies. And the reason they did that was because healthcare technology grants were not being funded. And So whereas everything else is much pure, they have one that is essentially dedicated to healthcare technology, and also set up the peer review for that to be managed in a local way to try and improve, have special calls. You'd think that would work. It works to a point. We still have the same problem. And we've touched on, oh, it might be difficult to get funding. One of the issues here is ourselves. Peer review, we set ourselves very high standards. And it's actually academics who are saying, you can't fund that next interdisciplinary project. You've got to fund something pure. So we're wonderful sometimes at saying, you know, we can't get funding, but some of this comes back to ourselves and peer review. But if you though take a step back and you look at what's the problem with interdisciplinary research funding, is you do not take something from concept through to being used in clinical care in the 3 to 5 years of a typical grant. It can take 10 years, it can take 15 years. And there are very few schemes that will have the continuous funding that will allow you, that if you've done well in stage 1, to take it to the next phase, to take it to the next phase. And this is what academics need to do, is to talk more about, we need funding of this kind that allows you to, it should be milestone based, but you should have the possibility to take ideas through, because at the end of every 3 or every 5 years, it stops and you've often got a gap and we lose a lot. And that again, who should solve this? It's not the funders, and they'll hopefully smiling in a minute saying, it's not the funders, it's ourselves saying that's the way we want to be funded. And certainly the UK, we're having more of that sort of conversation. We haven't solved it, unfortunately. I'd like to say if that was the solution, we've solved it. We haven't. But if we look at what we need, it's that.
So, just one quick, okay, you go ahead.
No, I have to respond to this. Just to put everybody on the same page, currently most of the Indian funding is PI driven. So there are very few projects like Garbhini is one of the such exception I can see, which are institutional driven projects. But most of the funding is a PI driven, and it's a self-effort which happens. That is what Anurag was mentioning. So now, having said that, what Alison brought out is that it is us who is actually making that. It means academicians who are all sitting here probably. But the truth has to be told. I mean, in the sense that even though the academicians are the ones which are sitting, are being part of the grant review panels and other things, but remember, at the end of the day, it is the mandate of the panel which overrides. So what we say typically is that if the mandate of the panel is not interdisciplinary, it is meant for funding something in the electrical engineering. So they are going to look at purely electrical engineering. So we can't override that part saying that, no, this belongs in the electrical engineering. No, it's going to come up this. That means that there has to be more call for proposals in the interdisciplinary trainings. Of course, Welcome Trust is one such thing. I see HFSP is another one which allows the cross-disciplinary one, but they are very competitive. They're very competitive to get into those kind of funding schemes. And they're also a little more harder to manage because you really need to build those. And remember, most of the funding cycles in India ends at 3 years. So by the time you start collecting the data and then you set up the team and everything, 3 years is gone. And then you look very poor in front of the review panel. That in 3 years, what you have achieved is very minimal. And then later you may not even get funded by the panel, even though there might be funding which is available. So these are the real issues. Of course, I don't have any solutions. If you ask me, what do? I don't even apply for funding. So,
I just want to, not just very quickly, one sentence. I want to thank DBT. No, I'm saying like that it's not that the efforts are not coming from DBT. They have set up technical evaluation committees that do look at a lot of data science and AI projects, and a lot of data science and AI projects do get funded. Diversity has increased definitely this year round. Last year, or the last round, was more like all biologists who sort of transitioned into data science and AI and sort of meddling with it. But now I think it's more interdisciplinary. But as you said, more of such efforts are required. Just one doing it is just a start, I think. Yeah.
That's good. I'm glad you made that comment.
So let me speak on multiple ways. One is a highly funded biologist who dabbles into data science, one. So that's the disclaimer. Number two is a person who sits on God knows how many funding committees there are. My perception is somewhat different. And maybe we can take Anamika's view also at some point on this. I think the number of calls that go out for interdisciplinary projects is very high. There is no shortage of calls for such projects. Most of us who sit on those committees are relatively open-minded. I do agree with Alison. Not every member of the committee is equally open-minded, and very often the problem is us ourselves. But let's assume for a second that the committee is fine. Not everyone is, but some committees are good. Almost always we end up cribbing about the quality of the proposal. And the reason the quality of the proposal is poor is because it's not truly an interdisciplinary proposal. It is written by a person from one discipline with his narrow view of the problem, with a name added of somebody from other discipline who has barely even looked at the problem. Sometimes I look at the name of well-known doctors on proposals which are medical, and I look at the proposal itself, which may be from somebody who is non-medical, and I know for certain the doctor has not spent more than 5 minutes looking at this because I know they're better than this. Yeah, not even 5 minutes. So sometimes, and the type of solutions we are coming up with, Alison, and I can say this because this is a problem. And the problem is partly because people are too busy. For two people from different disciplines, everybody looking for big names to add to their proposal, to come up with a well thought out proposal in the period of time they actually work. Everybody wants the HOD of some place, right? I mean, nobody wants a younger guy who has time. The second side is that if you realize the funding system in terms of application is broken, you can start top down. You can say this is an area of interest. Here are a few people whom we trust to hopefully not bring all their own institutions into the project mix. Start identifying some younger people who want to work on the problem. Hopefully a few people who combine 2-3 disciplines can speak 2-3 languages. They don't have to be experts, they just need to speak the languages and then build something together. I am very certain, Shinjini, when I go back to you, you will tell me when Garbhini was thought of, it was something along the lines of what I'm saying. And I know that Anarika will certainly say, we have done multiple projects like this top down because we simply were not finding enough projects ground up of good enough quality. So to people in this room, it is very easy sometimes for me to tell you, the funding is not enough, the government only puts 0, all that is true. The government does not put enough money into SMT. But where it is not putting enough money is into the roots, the universities, better quality science over there. Top down, I personally find this is the easiest possible country to get funded for the same quality proposal that you would give elsewhere in the world. I mean, many of my proposals I have got funded before I knew anyone, before I sat on any committees, would not have even crossed the second round in an NIH application system. So with that said, it's a bit of a different perspective from everyone, but maybe I'll go back to you, Shinjini.
Basically, I think each one of them, the principal investigator doesn't really involve the clinician in their discussion. They don't really understand the clinician's problem and then look at it. The discussion is not there. Like Sir, Professor Anurag just now said, it is just for the name that the clinician is there. Does the discussion really happen? If the discussion really happens, we will come up with better solutions. You, the engineering people and the other people will understand what the clinician is really facing. That doesn't happen, or at least I think it doesn't happen. I'm not sure.
So before I throw it open to our colleagues here, and we really want to hear what they have to say. I just want to tell you two things, two stories. One is that many years back, and some Amazonians sitting here know that, that IIT Delhi, there's a faculty of IIT Delhi at All India Institute of Medical Sciences. And I don't know, I didn't know it for many, many years. And then when I looked at the AIIMS directory and I found IIT Delhi, one of the faculty, and nothing really was happening. But what really made it happen was the Stanford India, Molly is also there, Stanford India Biodesign Program. And that was initiated by DBT when Dr. Mahan was secretary. He actually put the physicians and the engineers together and collaborated with Stanford and created this whole environment where there was clinical immersion. And it was interesting how you got different disciplines coming into this program. There were physicians, there were engineers, there were biologists, dentists who came in, got immersed, and went out. There were many companies which emerged from there. So that just putting a faculty there, like we said, or maybe if it had been the same campus, it would have been different. But just putting the faculty there. The second story about, I just want to put the story straight about Garbhani. I'm actually a pediatric gastroenterologist by training. And this is about comfort zone. And it was decided that Garbhani, it was really top down because preterm birth is an important problem. You need more interdisciplinary programs. And I was just given Garbhani that, okay, you started. And the reason why one pushes is that I was always taught by my mentor that never be comfortable where you are. Don't stop, don't be a cool, relaxed person, always worry about what you're doing. So that's a level you need to push to get out of your level or your comfort zone. So Garbhani also came as a program for interdisciplinary efforts, and it was a brainchild which came from DPT. We built on it, but so you do need some mission mode programs that need to take forward. Okay, I think we've spoken enough, and we really want, yeah, Molly, and can we give them the mic? Yeah. Okay. Anamika, you can speak your heart and mind. You're not going
I don't
to
think
be-
you're going to like it then. So, what Dr. Anurag says is bang on, and I really wonder if he's been working in DBT in some other avatar, So, it's not I think ours is the most open system. If you compare, across the world, it's the easiest to get grants from DBT. And if you actually look at the quality of proposals that get funded elsewhere and what get funded from us interdisciplinary areas, the quality is, you can't match that quality. So it's not that, in every area, Dr. Anurag knows, Dr. Sinha also knows that, we are open to interdisciplinary projects, but the kind of projects that we get, they are not up to the mark. And more often than not, it's just, 2-3 people just put together just for the heck of it. That's one thing. The other thing is that, so many, I would really like to know from you all. Everybody has talked about problems, that, and then there are models like Shinjini's model. But I would rather say that it's a phenomenal success, Dr. Shinjini, and you are the glue who's kept everything together, and that's a role model which is to be emulated. We have emulated when we created neonatal sepsis. Dr. Anurag knows, he was one of the leaders, experts in that particular program. We are making more on chronic disease biology, some more we are thinking, but all these programs, we are thinking of going top down, selecting younger people, by way of looking at the kind of publications they're making. I don't know what's a better way to find out the correct person, whether it should be the publication, because when you talk about interdisciplinary, sometimes if a physicist is submitting a proposal, which is conceptually very exciting, but he wouldn't have the publication in the right domain. So you people are the ones who would reject it, not us, right? The expert sitting over there, they'll say, oh, he's got no clinical experience, and iske saath koi clinician bhi nahi hai. Okay, put one clinician in this project, and that clinician would hardly be interested, right? And jiska concept tha, wo bhi gaya aur wo bhi gaya. It's like, so I would say that instead of it being, the other day, we were discussing, I also have the neurobiology program with me. So we were discussing with some of the neurosurgeons, and in the COVID times, there were some really exciting tools that have come out and people have started using them. probably some of you would know, and there are patents on those particular tools, and AIMS neurosurgery has already started using them. So I was asking this group as to, what is it that you did differently? How is it that this IIT Delhi and you people came together? Tell us that model. We would like to, build more such platforms and create the right kind of ecosystem that, and that was all very personalized, individual centric. That neurosurgeon said, I had some friends in IIT Delhi whom I grew up with. And, when we were talking over a cup of coffee or, and then this is how this idea emerged and we took it forward. And actually a very, very important tool or neurosurgery, whatever they required it for, that came out and it was patented and it is being used. But my question from you all would be like, like Dr. Alison said that in UK, there are models where there are systems where there is, in the medical school, there would be engineering graduates and they get that kind of exposure. So that is being built upon in India as well. There are interdisciplinary programs. So, but then I still feel that there have to be some platforms which we need to create to bring these two sects together, engineering as well as clinicians. And I'm not talking about fresh MBBS graduates. That's a different thing. That's a different line which needs to grow up, along with, they need to be trained in data sciences and other things. But we need our core clinicians also to come forward with the engineering teams. And for that, how to create that ecosystem in our country, how to create that platform. That's something that we struggle with. We would really like to do something. So that would be my question to the panel.
Yeah, sure.
So can I make a comment? When I started out in my career, which wasn't in biomedical engineering, I worked at GE. And what we found there, what I observed was, you would start a new collaboration, and your first collaboration, you'd work on a problem, and you would finish that. And then if you'd either never collaborate with the person again, or you would then go and work with them continuing. And it would always be the second project where you really understood the language, you really started to work on the right problem. And it was that then things take off. And I learned this very early on in my career. Is that how you sort of identified partnerships? And I think from what you've just said as well, it sounds to me as if, a lot of the proposals you get are about first collaborations. And so in the UK, sometimes there are the smaller grants where they have like pilot experiments working together. If those succeed, then you start to see things flourish. And I know also for international collaborations, it can be a bit like that. It took us a while, Shinjini, it took us a while to actually find the project.
Yes.
And we had a few attempts. It was partnerships, but it wasn't a formal. Well, we had those as well. Yeah. But it was also the fact developing a relationship, a professional relationship, does take time. And when you've then established it, it will then flourish. And so maybe some of what's being seen in the grant proposals is the fact that really you need to decide that maybe it's worth taking a risk to see if these partnerships work. If people are too busy, they drift apart. Otherwise, if they will invest and they've got a shared vision, it will then take forward. So I know I've seen that in the UK and in the healthcare technology area as well, is you see lots of people think it's easy money, we'll give it a go, we'll try. But then you've got the people who are really committed, and the people who are really committed think about the problems 24/7 and we're the ones who go on and form partnerships.
So Molly, before coming to you, one of the platforms that was created by the Grand Challenges India and through BIRAC was getting data scientists and clinicians together and people together to analyze data. I don't know how many in the audience know about the KI grants that came out. And actually that is how Himanshu and Ram got together and did analysis of the Bhatnagar data and came out with basic models which they are now validating. So it was a partnership which came up from the Grand Challenges for. Oh, sorry. Oh, that is Himanshu looking for partners, and then this grant came up, and then So you have to step out, like he said, of your company. So there was a call. Himanshu was ready to step out. We had Ram and Condi interested in data sciences, two physicians.
No, but
Again,
did the KI glue them together, or by themselves they found each other?
so
They found each other compatible.
yeah,
They came
it went
out,
together.
They came together and submitted for that.
Yeah.
No, so when Byrack did a road show for KI, they sort of explained what is required, and we were always like, as from IIT Madras, we were looking out for data, good healthcare data, and I think that initiated the call. And I think Gagandeep was there, and there was some initial. She was visiting CMC Vellore, I think. So it was what I would say, it was serendipitous in the beginning, but I think once we realized that it was something that can build on, it really was, there was like sort of positive energy from both sides. So it has to be compatibility as well. You need to sort of
I'll just add one small thing to that. As a recurring motif you will see again and again, young people. It really does not happen any other way because you need time. You need time to interact, to discuss, to come up with a better solution, refine the grant, continue with multiple iterations. And to me, that has been the secret thing. And I was lucky enough that when I came back to India, joined CSIR, when in the early phase of my career, I got reasonably big money through CSIR with an ability to meet many other people at a similar stage in their career at a time when I still had time to do all this. And especially in India, as you go further up the ladder, the managerial part of what you do slowly overtakes your time for science. And that's why young people is critical. And for senior people to enable young people is critical. And that was unique about Dr. Bhatnagar. Right? So again and again, you will see successful things in India come when either young people get together on their own or senior people of the type that would enable young people working under them to go. And that's, I think, good thing for these people in this.
Sorry, I'm not asking a question, but I'm sort of making a comment from personal experience. She mentioned both the Garbini proposal. She mentioned the Garbini proposal, but there was also a proposal for a center called the Pediatric Biology Center at THSTI. Fortuitously, what happened at THSTI was the way the proposal for the was written. We had a huge number of assistant professors and probably 3 deans and 1 position for a full professor. And which I think to this date, the 3 deans, we have never had 3 deans together. We've probably had 2 at one point, just 1 dean, but it was a whole lot of mid to late 30-year-olds who sat and wrote the Garbini proposal with direction from a couple of very senior people. But it essentially was at least 8 people have written 3 pages or more on the Garbini proposal. And what you were talking about interdisciplinarity is that we're making it a binary nomenclature. So you can have interdisciplinarity by fulfilling the bare minimal requirements of interdisciplinarity. It's like saying we have a room full of 10 people, all of them speak 1 language. And for the sake of interdisciplinarity, we get in 1 person who can speak 2. That will at best get you to add on, bring in involvement between 2 people. The other 8 people still don't know any common language. So until you have enough number of people, so by pure math, you will realize that at least 40% of that room have to speak some other, 50% more likely, have to speak some other language so that you are able to communicate across all people. A lot of times, the lack of involvement of some groups of people, physicians or others, is one, you're adding them at the minimal requirement, and therefore you're adding them in a sense on the basis of how much star value they have, because you're going to add only 1 person. But when you are allowed to have a large number of researchers with no limitation, which is again another advantage of Garbini that we forget about and not see it in terms of structural terms, is that we could have 50 researchers and investigators and co-investigators, and there was no restriction from DBT that co-PIs, PIs, I mean, co-Is, you could have any number. So that gave us freedom to add people on without sort of feeling like we are breaking some an administrative boundary. The other is the pure joy. There's one thing about collaborative research that if it is not fun, it doesn't happen. We've grown up with jack of all trades, master of none as a negative terminology and connotation throughout our lives. And what I have noticed is the people who bring joy into any group are the jack of all trades. They're the ones, and invariably they end up at a later stage as just being people who haven't decided what they want to be a master at. And finally, maybe even in their 50s, they eventually will become a master of something given the opportunity. This whole thing of wanting masters in all facets of a proposal, as almost all of you have said, ends up sort of killing the joy, getting people who are too busy to spend time together and not having sufficient interdisciplinarity. It's like a pie chart where you have 1% involvement of 20 people, but just not enough of everybody.
Thanks, Molly. I'll react to that later. So Molly and I go back 40 years, so it's okay. Ram, you have a question? Can we, wait a minute, can we take Alice first? Yeah, Alice. Yes.
Thank you so much. This is a really interesting discussion. I suppose I speak, my main qualification to speak is that I've gotten old enough now to have various collaborations. And do you know, I've come more and more to the conclusion, you mentioned serendipity and fortuity, that quite a lot of these things are kind of almost random Brownian motion academics who are floating in space and bumping into each other and occasionally gelling together. I take it as a given that we're all ambitious and able and want to go places. So I guess for the funders is creating that infrastructure to allow that Brownian motion to happen and to allow those poles to gel together when they bump into each other. That's actually all you need to do, is not to discriminate against multidisciplinarity, or if you want to be more positive, to positively discriminate for it. For example, by making calls, giving additional points, if you like, in a call to multidisciplinary teams. And in the UK, we've had several examples through our funding agencies, the NIHR, where they positively encourage interdisciplinarity and they write it into the briefs of the calls that they make. So that's all I wanted to say. I think multidisciplinarity will happen as long as the infrastructure, the conditions are there for it to happen. How much we can direct it, honestly, I sometimes question that.
I would like to continue your point. It's a very important one. So recently we were designing what we would call a science squad or a science park. One of our advisors is Professor Venki Ramakrishnan, Nobel laureate in Cambridge. He insisted that rather than each building having its own food supply or cafeteria, there must be a place in the center of the quad. There must be, there was not an open option, where all the people would pretty much have to go to get a decent cup of coffee unless they made in their own office. And he said, I do not know, but he said that some experiments like this by serendipity, perhaps, in the Oxbridge area, had shown there is no better way to get people together, whether funders or anything else apart, is over food in a common place where people come together. And so we can either do it by removing the classical barriers until the gases mix, they cannot interact. We can do it by kind of creating concentrated areas where higher concentrations mix. Or we can simply do it by empowering universities, and while designing them, creating natural forces like food that make people come together. So, and the other thing on this direction is something, for example, the Simons Foundation in the US does. So they have junior fellowships and senior fellowships, and the only thing required, I mean, after the selection apart, to meet the progress criteria of the foundation is how many times have different people met. There is no other criteria. They're not looking for any particular output. They're not looking for reports. All they would be looking for is how many times have all the fellows in the entire region come together and met over a nice dinner or something else. They expect, once they have found sufficient number of bright people across things, they're coming together frequently is all this about. So it's absolutely in the lines of what you said. And one more thing I will say, Maulikas, I can't resist it. You said jack of all trades, master of none. The continuation of that is, in uncertain times, better than a master of one.
Yeah, so Anurag,
There is this West Canteen, which is the only place you can get food, and you're in Colaba, so you're not going to go out eat every day. So that's what facilitated a lot of these interdisciplinary talk between physicists, chemists, even theoretical physicists, and mathematicians were certainly a loop, but others did interact.
so I have to say this here, and so Molly and I belong to a cohort which was mentored by Dr. Khan, and after our clinics and after our OPDs, we used to sit in his little office, which was literally this table, and eat gunned from South Extension. And the more we ate, the more questions came out, you know. So it was done at a much smaller level. Yeah. No, well, so it, you know, it was at a smaller level, but it is about free thinking, and it's about giving that platform for free thinking. And that is why, Ram, we come to you. We've kept a session after this where we want the students, the young colleagues, the younger and the older colleagues to just let the inhibitions down and interact. We're not going to be sitting here, just go out somewhere, identify a place where we just want you people to talk and vent your thoughts and ask your senior colleagues what are the career objectives. We are experimenting. We hope that the people feel enough to talk. So that's a follow up of what. So
Yeah, I have one comment and a question. So the comment is, as County and I have been brought up as an interdisciplinary, people, and we know each other, and we have, I think we have the knack of identifying a person who is similar to us. We have that knack. I somehow feel that, and it's just like choosing your tennis doubles partner. And I remember the slide that Molly for the first time introduced me to interdisciplinary, in a figurative way. Leandro Pace has been more successful as a doubles tennis player than a singles. So that's the comment. So somehow, if the brought up is right, this guy suits us. This guy is an interdisciplinary inclination guy. So, of course, no, I'm sorry, extremely sorry for that. So this person, extremely sorry for that. This person is interdisciplinarily inclined. So then it kind of, the conversation flows very naturally. Somehow that's an instinct we kind of develop, I think. The question is, the biggest challenge I faced in my initial period at THSTI is twofold. One is identity crisis. Second is, thinking myself as an imposter. So an imposter syndrome. So over a period of time, my introductions to people who come into THSTI has changed a lot. Every time I see a person, I used to introduce myself as something else. Initially, but over the 6 years, I'm not sure. That's the question to you all. What did you do? Now, I no more feel, bad about getting confused as to how I am going to introduce myself. Who am I? I have come out of that, but I don't know how it happened. So I think that's the trick. If that trick can be, spread out, then I think it's easier for interdisciplinary people to come.
That's a very important point. Ram, before we come, I want
just to introduce, I'm Rahul Salalmai from Institute of Mathematical Sciences. I have made a career switch before during my postdoc from theoretical condensed matter physics to computational biology. And now, and that is more like molecular biology, sequence algorithms, and so on. So now I'm in the process of switching again, not really switching, but exploring this field. So about some of the comments that were made from the stage, one is I am not sure of the importance of having single campuses that accommodate science, engineering, medicine, and so on in this post-pandemic age. Even before that, my closest collaborators were in Bangalore, Pune, not in my own city. And we interacted, we met maybe once or twice a year, but we talked on the phone, Skype in those days. You can get a lot of work done that way, and it should be much easier now. And it's much more productive because the ideal tennis doubles partner for you might not be in your city. And so I feel the importance of, I mean, it's great that, IITs and IISc and so on might be building these medical schools that trying to bring people together, but it should not be a necessary criterion. In terms of DBT's funding interdisciplinary programs and other funding agencies, I'm kind of an outsider to the system because I'm not in a biology institute as such, though we do have a computational biology group for the last few years. I have had a mixed record. I don't really need too much funding in my situation, but where I've applied, we've been successful sometimes, not successful sometimes. But I have heard from many people that it is harder to get funding from DBT if you're not one of the big guys or in one of the big places, and it is a very much mutual back scratching. It's the same people in all committees, and this is the criticism that you get from less well-known people working in the field in less elite institutions. I don't know whether it is justified or not. The other criticism that is very common is that DBT might give you a lot of money on paper, but it doesn't arrive, and you need to buy equipment and you can't get it. And just a couple of days ago, there was an article by Nandita Jayaraj that I recommend people to read. It interviews a former India Alliance fellow who's now in Australia. And part of the frustration was the lack of arrival of the money that had been promised. So there are many issues in the Indian context. Lack of enthusiasm among people to do interdisciplinary research is not one of them. I mean, for the last 20 years, I don't think I've seen anybody saying, why are you wasting your time doing these things? And there are people who think that it's an easy way for people to get recognition by doing, I mean, interdisciplinary is somehow easier than string theory or whatever it is. But I think what the Indian government can do is enable not just funding, but fund flow. B, have some, so the other thing I wanted to say is that for most people who are stepping into interdisciplinary, it is a risk. It might work, it might not work. So it's going to be a 20% project, like Google says. So 80% of the time you'll do something safe, 20% you'll do this. The funding system should sort of enable it, especially for young researchers. There should be some guaranteed money for maybe the first 5 years of a career. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But they shouldn't be asking for annual progress reports and things like that. At the end, you establish yourself and, yeah. Okay, that's a lot of thoughts for hand over the mic. Thanks.
Shinjini, can I just comment?
Yeah.
When it is public money, the accountability has to be there, whether it is India, UK, or any other funding agency. So I would really like to, and it's because of lack of trust. Because if you give out grant to 100 people, if there are 50 genuine researchers, there are other 50 who would actually not be up to the mark or actually not do anything. So that actually clouds the whole system. So whatever these practices, whatever have the practices have evolved, is as a result of all these wisdom that has been gathered over the years. So it's not one-sided that only the funders. I completely agree that there is a problem in the fund flow, and it's not because we give our hearts and souls out. We want to get the right kind of papers from the PIs. We help them out. We hold hands. We tell them, you see.
So we believe that. Don't worry.
No, I'm just telling him to But then there are different systems in government. There is a section which is called the internal financial division, which always works I would not say they would work along with us. They are always working against us, right? So those are challenges, and it's not wrong. They are not wrong because that's their duty. That is how. That is why they are there. They have to look at the other aspect of it. So I don't know what is how to actually ensure that fund flow. But with the new TSA system coming, I think at the moment there are a number of teething problems. But over a period of time, if the TSA system is correctly implemented, this problem would go away. That's how we would like to, and you won't need to submit your UCSCs in the correct format. So all that problem should eventually vanish. And that's not a wishful thinking. I think that's going to happen.
So I think we can have this discussion later on because I know there are issues, but that's not meant to, we don't want to, no. So, no, I'm glad this venting and questions are happening, but since we have some time limits, Alison has one quick. Alison, go ahead.
I was going to respond to your comment about co-location because I was the one who mentioned it. I think the really important, you made a very valid point, but you also described your own position where you're clearly a serial interdisciplinary person and you've already got the skills to do that. Where co-location really happens is if you're combining the training of people, doing the research and the science, where you do need that co-location because everybody's doing team science. And then just on the comment of that, the pandemic has been a disaster for that reason because everybody's had to go away. What's happening now is you're having to rebuild. There's a whole generation of students who haven't benefited and postdocs, senior researchers who haven't benefited from the buddying that goes on and the co-creation of great things that happens when you bring people together. And certainly, I don't think you can create that via Zoom or Teams personally. We haven't managed to do it.
I would love to amplify that point by saying what the pandemic did is bring down the co-located people's advantages to the same level as the people who were not co-located like your situation. So it was not that it was better for you, it was worse for them. So they came down to the same level. But on a more serious note beyond that comment, I honestly think we don't understand enough the importance of co-location in India because we have never seen it. So you cannot sometimes fully appreciate the advantage of a system that you've never been exposed to and seen. And as it is, at least on the medical side, because today we are talking about AI and transforming healthcare, which is engineering CS more on one side or data science and medical/biological on the other. The fact the two streams don't get to mix at all means that you can't have people who can take both majors and minors. They can't get exposed to CS while also already doing medicine. So what you are speaking of is collaboration between two people with different skills. I have always personally found it to be inferior as a model compared to two people with core strengths, but also knowing the languages of each other in advance. The way it happens in systems like ours, they don't know their language, they work the first time, then they learn the language, the second time works better. What I'm speaking about is by co-location, the language gets picked up so that it becomes more effective to a larger number of people. And that, to my mind, is why co-location is the way forward for a country like India.
Yeah. Kandi, please. First, let's give the other guest. There's no other question there. Yeah. Sorry, Kandi. Next.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am, I have two questions. The first part of the question is that, like you said that funding is a very major problem in India, right? But ma'am, don't you think that a graduate student who passes from a IIT or any tier 1 college as a BTech graduate gets a very good handsome salary in his hand, like 1.5 lakh, 1 lakh monthly. But a student who is pursuing his PhD, he is getting just 31,000 per month. So why do a student would like to give 10 years of his life without getting enough money in his pockets? So from where would that passion come? Like, this is one part of the question. And the second part of the question is that, like, in our system, I have made so many transitions in my life. Like, I did my bachelor's in pure biology biomedical science, and then I moved to complex system, and currently I'm working in the field of AI in healthcare. So how, and I have seen literally the how a basic science student pursue his education, and how a like BTech college is pursuing the education. So don't you think that a lot of changes into the current education system is required in order to prepare literally the scientist? I'm like, I don't consider literally like from one point of time that a data scientist are literally the scientist. I'm not considering from my point of view, because somewhere we are getting the data, we are not we are making a team definitely, and some person is going to give his point by looking at the why part, and some person is looking at the how part, but we are not looking at what is the implication of solving this question and how it is going to benefit from 100 years or 200 years from now. We are just trying to solve the problems which is the need of the hour right now. So this is one of the questions, man. Thanks.
I think I am qualified to answer this question because I see my students getting more than a crore, whereas we get peanuts. Um, so, so let me just start off on this. So if you ask me, why do you work for 31,000? I say that you have to be that crazy person who is passionate about that. It's not about the money, it's about what you want to do. That's number one. Having said that, now more or less on the same points, now at least MHRD has this Prime Minister Research Fellowship, which at least gets you 70,000 rupees, which is tax-free per month as a scholarship. So there is some incentive for people to do PhD, but of course it's a very selective program which runs in Tier 1 and Tier 2 colleges only right now. That's a number one thing. Number two thing about what the question you asked about, why do you require this kind of interdisciplinary training? The reason is, if you look at the number of faculty positions, I'm just going to answer it very briefly. If you do the math, you count how many IITs are there or how many ISERs are there. So overall per state, one or maybe two. And then you think about how many faculties will they recruit. That's about 30 per year is what they typically recruit. And you do the math at the back of the envelope, the number of positions turn out to be 1,000 or 1,500. And I'm talking about very good schools. A number of graduates you get, for example, you think about IISc, it graduates 500 students per year. IIT, similar numbers, 500 PhDs are coming out. Where are the jobs for all these people? How do you stand out in this crowd? Right? So now in that way, the interdisciplinary is going to stand out because you have something which others don't have. Right? There you have interdisciplinary training. Probably your application can fly well in electrical engineering. Your application can fly in the data science. Your application can fly in the computer science. You have more opportunities which are available to you. So the pure disciplines ones are going to be the one which will be handicapped as faculty positions are becoming more and more competitive. So this is my 2 cents of thought.
Quickly to add to this, no, so I just want to add, like in the recent IIT Madras faculty recruitment, there were 4 applications that had 4 applicants that had applied to 3 departments, and all of them got at least one of the positions. All those that applied to a single department, the rejection rate was more than 70%. So he's right in saying that if you are having interdisciplinary research background where your application said you did BTech in computer science, then you went to do this, then you went to do this, and you're applying to biotechnology department, you must be brilliant. If you are staying, if you're like a horse with 2 visors on the side and running a straight path on it, that's fair. If all the horses do that, but what makes you different? And that's what is being looked out for. And I think that is an important thing. And if more and more students realize that early on and do the training accordingly, I think that would change the scenario which we are sort of all discussing how to change.
Okay, I think we need to look at time and this discussion. Yeah, Molly, 1 minute. Convi's question is there. Can you discuss this later with Himanshu? And we have a session after this, which is where you can actually take your lines out, bear your heart out. Convi, I think we give you the privilege of the last question. Molly
Thank you.
had some. Molly, can you do it in the next session? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So since we are talking about young people and grants, funding, opportunities, I would want to point out a couple of things. So I am a early career India Alliance fellow, as you all know. I think that fellowship is very good and it has enabled me to work independently. At the same time, the fellowship mandates that you should have a supervisor, you should have a mentor, you should have good collaborators. And this system has actually supported me very well. So I thought I would like to share that, and I would like to see more such fellowships to promote young people coming into this interdisciplinary area. Maybe only specialized interdisciplinary fellowships like that. And second thing is in our Felopus grant with University of Oxford, we had this career development program for young investigators. And sir, as you said, pulling BTech people is very difficult, and we managed to create enough force to pull two. So Varun and Divyanshu, we have trained both of them. Both of them have decided to pursue career in this field. One in industry, and Varun and Divyanshu got selected for a PhD program at Oxford. So maybe all grants might have a component of training young people. If senior people are applying for grants, that might be one good way of moving forward. So I just want to I thought to share these two experiences, and I would like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think we'll close this session because I think
I think this kind of segues, what County said, kind of segues into the next session.
yeah, so let me
Which is
just
where-
thank the
yeah.
panelists, and I just want to close on one note which I have grown up with, and I cannot have a session where I can't mention Dr. Bhan, who's actually behind even this whole program, and Alison knows that. And he used to always tell us, just be uncomfortable all the time and get out of that comfort zone and be an outlier. I think that is the bottom line, and and Ashok is sitting there. Everyone thinks Ashok is a private practitioner, but really not. He is practicing and doing a lot of good to many, 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 many people there. But over weekends, he's actually going and teaching in the villages. So you can actually be interdisciplinary in many ways, even in the area that you are. And I think that is what it means. Just be an outlier, and I think life will teach you what you need to do next. So with that, I really want to thank each one of you. Yeah, it's been a long day, and I just want to uh,
Yeah, so the session is at Marisco, where, yeah, you can take a break there. So it's it's a very informal session overlooking the sea. And, I think this is one, as a young investigator, one would earn for, is to talk to people who have inspired them, motivated them, and whom they want to emulate. And there are enough people in this room who can inspire, motivate, and who we need to emulate. And let's take that informally. And please,
it's not
please,
it's not compulsory.
it's not
You
compulsory,
it's
but
just-
let it be as much informal as possible, and let the discussion flow. So we don't want to direct any kind of discussion or pattern to it. Let the discussion flow freely.
So for the senior faculty, we request you, if after a short, if you can. Sorry? Yes, maybe after the short bio break, it's compulsory.
So I'd like to add one more thing for the participants. When I was doing PhD with Dr. Anurag, in the final year of my PhD, he started to organize program called DIPS, Developing Indian Physician Scientists. It's a small group of workshop like this, where I met Professor Bhatnagar. And before I know, I ended up with this early career fellowship with her. So it's a very good opportunity for you to interact with everybody and feel free. It's a very informal interaction. And yeah, looking forward to see you downstairs. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for today. I think it's been really nice.